And now let's go ahead and get into some of the week's top stories. Now, we're going to start things off right now with our Superman on film update for April the 29th, 2022. So, look, it was great to actually have somewhat of an update last week. And it looks like I've got another one. Look at it. We're on a bit of a streak here where there's
Yeah.
actually stuff to talk about. Now, what's interesting about this one, I need to preface it, is the source. I don't quite know why we're all paying so much attention to this, myself included. Maybe it's because it sounds so intriguing or like it really could be true or whatever. But all kinds of outlets have run with this story. There is this random Twitter user who might be laughing all the way through. I can't believe people fell for this, but there's a random Twitter user named Cherry Faluda who, apropos of nothing, put up a thread that said, here's a thread with everything I know about the Superman reboot. And look, since other credible websites have ran with it, I feel like, fine, let's go ahead and sift through this thread and break it down a little bit. All right.
Sure.
And what's interesting about this, though, is it almost feels like it could be a sequel to what I discussed last week without you. And I don't know if you had a chance to check out 146 since you weren't on it, but
I did.
oh, all right. Well, just to recap, in case there's anyone listening who didn't listen, which they should go back and check out 146 because there was some very juicy stuff on that. But at the time, I found out what I shared was that this Ta-Nehisi Coates script seems to be planned as at the time, what I was hearing was that it was going to be a period piece about a black Superman, and it was going to have a lot of sort of socio-political commentary in there, obviously because of that era in American history and the idea of it being a black Superman and how would the country accept a black Superman when it's still a segregated country that feels like the color of your skin determines what kind of rights you get to have. So that's what I was sharing last week, that the Coates reboot seems to be that. And now here comes this Twitter thread, which interestingly kind of piggybacks on that and says, well, it was once going to be that, but it's actually evolved into something else. So let's go ahead and look through that. So
Sure.
this Cherry Faluda says, one, while the project was originally intended to be a period piece, the final draft submitted by Coates is currently not a period piece. Two, it's not about a black Superman being a victim of racism. Rather, it uses Superman's alien heritage as a parallel to racism. They are, however, going through with colorblind casting. So that's interesting. I'm going to just go through all of them first, and then we can kind of react independently, individually rather. For number three, he said Superman is heavily nerfed, being taken back to his golden age roots. He can no longer fly, but he can instead leap tall buildings in a single bound. He also lacks heat vision, frost breath, and X-ray vision. He's also described as moving at Mach 7. All right, you getting all this, Ben? Four,
Yeah.
they do have descriptions of the characters in the script, which gives away their races. Lois Lane is written with an Asian actress in mind. Perry White is written as an African American man, and Jimmy Olsen is described as a freckled redhead. So no race bending with Jimmy. I'll save my reaction to that when we go beat by beat. Five, the film is currently utilizing the Golden Age version of the Ultra Humanite as the main antagonist, although this may change. At no point in the story does he use the albino gorilla body. I hope you're taking.
Oh, thank God.
I know you were assuming, oh, the
I was
Ultra
worried
Humanite
about that.
gotta be using the albino gorilla body, but you rest assured he's not. Six, this script is rather long, clocking in at 165 pages. This may be due to the fact that the film is being written as an awards contender rather than a regular superhero film. It portrays Superman as a champion of the oppressed. The government hates him, but the people love him. 7, and this is the final point from this thread. The film is a love letter to Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's original comics. It also has a dedication to them. Pa Kent's character is based off of Jerry Siegel. It actually has a dedication to a lot of writers, such as Jack Kirby, who serves as the inspiration for Dan Turpin. All right. So now we're gonna go beat by beat here, Brederson.
Alrighty.
Number one, we is just kind of it is what it is. But the fact that it was apparently originally intended to be a period piece, but the final draft submitted by Coates recently is not a period piece. How does just that on its own strike you? Hearing that?
Well, it's interesting because when I did read this entire thing, or when we were first hearing some of even the rumors
Yeah.
that we were kind of that you discussed on the last podcast without me,
Hmm.
I was thinking, I'm like, this kind of fits into like that Joker Black Label, and it could just be like a Black Label Superman thing. And I,
Yep.
especially now reading that it was going to be the period piece. That's totally what I thought. But I
Yeah.
wonder if they were like, nah, this needs to be a jumping off point for a new mainline Superman. Don't make it a period piece.
Yeah.
So, but I still think it's a cool idea. I just I mean, listen, we can't please everybody. We need to have different interpretations, but I don't know what everybody wants. It seems to me like people want like a mainline Superman entry that's going to be a part of this universe, or at least something that's more modern.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I could go either way on this. It's pretty cool. We could talk more about it too because it's interesting that they're not going to do the period piece, but they are very much pulling from a period of
Yeah.
Superman comics. So
For
interesting.
sure. For sure. Yeah. For me, it's like I feel like it's too soon to be doing like a period piece Elseworld branch off thing. Like I feel
Yeah.
like with Joker, they were able to do that because there was a mainline Joker. You know, they have the Jared Leto Joker, but also they knew that that Matt Reeves was doing his whole Batman world and he's going to introduce the Joker the way he sees fit. So it's like when you know that there's going to be a more traditional Joker out there somewhere, it lets you make an Elseworld tale that plays with it a little bit. Right
Right.
now, Superman's largely been missing from popular culture for many, many years. So to
Yeah.
do this, it's going to reintroduce him to popular culture. But if it's like a warped alternate version, does that really help us? You know, so I'm kind of relieved that it's not going to be that.
Yeah.
And my mind starts going back to some conversations we had 2 episodes ago about like maybe the initial bosses okayed that period piece, Elseworld, starkly different thing. But just like when all those DC movies got delayed a few months back, and now we're linking it possibly to Discovery and the new ownership going, hold on, don't proceed with anything until we've taken power because we want to see exactly what you're working on before we just go full steam ahead. So it makes me wonder if somewhere in these last few months, you know, Coates received a phone call from the new ownership or even from Toby Emmerich going, is there any way to broaden this and modernize it so it could actually serve as a reboot that would be part of like, you know, the mainline continuity, let's say. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me at point number one. I'm very happy if that is the case, that it is going to be
Sure.
more just a mainline new introduction for Superman. Now, for point number two, it's not about a black Superman being a victim of racism. Rather, it uses Superman's alien heritage as a parallel to racism. They are, however, going through with colorblind casting. So, you first, Brett. How does that strike your ear?
Yeah, I mean that makes more sense to me. Like even when the rumors were coming out and they were like, "Oh, there's a black writer. It's going to be a black Superman who's going to
Mm-hmm.
deal with race." It's like, well, it is kind of cooked into the character, him being from another planet. There is always that skeptic. I mean, we see it in Superman and Lois every week. We see it throughout the comics. There's always that
Yeah,
skepticism. Who are you? You're a god, basically, and you're from somewhere else. Like, how could you possibly understand us humans? Or that's always baked in and
yeah,
cooked in. So yeah, but that's cool doing colorblind casting, but like just I guess like to not like explicitly like make it maybe too on the nose. I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe it is still very on the nose. I don't know.
yeah.
But I mean, whatever. It's cool. It's all cool. It's all
You're
cool by
with it.
me,
You're
man.
with it.
I'm
Yeah,
down
for
with it.
me, like
It
I'm
makes
with it
sense.
too. And honestly, what's interesting though, see the colorblind bit, I'm a little, I'm intrigued as to how that will go and how that will be received. And again, it's funny. I feel like my motivations are a little like selfish here
Right.
because I personally don't really care. I feel like I could be open to someone of any race being Superman as long as the character seems like identifiably the superhero, like a
Right.
recognizable version of the character. Like, oh, I know that guy. I don't care what color his skin is. I could tell that that's Superman.
Right.
But my concern is that going to create a whole conversation that doesn't have to happen, that is then going to eat into the film's box office and success? And to me, that's a problem because the last few times they've rebooted Superman, it's been to some sort of controversy. Superman Returns
Right.
came out and it didn't get a sequel and it didn't make enough money, and people were, they were kind of, sour and mixed on it. Man of Steel, similar thing where it got the very divisive Rotten Tomatoes reviews, and the box office, according to Hollywood accountants and studio executives, it didn't make what they had hoped. So my whole point is, I just want a movie that is just going to be an absolute smash hit. So I know we're going to get 3, 4, 5 Superman movies in the years to come. When I hear about colorblind casting, it just makes me worry, like, oh no, is this going to become a thing now where like half the audience is fighting that why did you go all social justice warrior on
Yeah,
Superman, and
it's
the
too
other
woke,
half,
you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't want any extra conversations
Yeah.
muddying the waters and getting in the way of a new Superman franchise taking the world by storm,
Yeah,
you know?
and I mean it's interesting because you have like right, like you said, like if you use the alien, well, obviously he is an alien, so that is the
Yeah,
allegory for racism. But then think about it, like if you do also cast a black actor, like how do you also not address that he's black and we have a lot of racism baked into our society against people of that skin color,
yeah.
and he's an alien. So it's like
Unless that, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I,
listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean that, but that's an even more powerful message and story you got to knock out. There's more that comes along with that,
yeah.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't like not want that, but
Hmm.
that just that's an extra layer. You know what I
That
mean?
is an extra layer. It's just something else for people to talk about and pick apart.
Yeah.
And I just,
Well,
I
and to
hate
do
to
a good
say it.
job with in a
Yeah,
script. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that's an extra layer you have to address in the movie.
yeah.
It changes things a lot,
It
really,
does,
more
it
than you
does, and
probably
listen,
think.
if the
Yeah.
later point is correct that they're looking more for, like, an awards contender, then I kinda get going there, but again, it just makes me a little anxious about, like, is this movie gonna get mangled by people forming all these harsh opinions on it before it's ever made it into theaters because of the colorblind stuff, you know? Um, but the funny thing is, the timing of this rumor, for me, sits just right because I
Hmm.
just finished that book, Superman Smashes the Klan, which next time I see you, I want to lend to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to read it. I want us to talk about it
Sure.
because what's fascinating about that book and that story, it takes place in the 40s, and it's one of the first stories where his alien heritage is very much used as an allegory for being an immigrant and for feeling racism and for feeling like an outsider. Like in that book, the author does use the alien thing as like a correlation. And in fact, Superman feels some shame about where he's really from because he knows people judge him or are going to look at him funny or all that sort of stuff. Like reading, just when I read that it's planning to use Superman's alien heritage as a parallel to racism, my mind went straight to Superman Smashes the Klan. So you should
Sure.
definitely read that book, and I do
Absolutely.
think it's an interesting way to approach the story. We haven't quite seen that yet. In Superman 1, the alien stuff didn't even really factor in any kind of negative way. He just finds out that he's that, and he just seemingly embraces his Kryptonian heritage almost straight away, knowing that he'll never be one of us, and there is that sort of melancholy, bittersweet, I thought I was a human and as it turns out I'm not. But by and large, the alien stuff doesn't really slow anything down or get in the way. And then in Man of Steel, the alien thing is played for like fear. Like, if people know, it's not even necessarily you're an alien, but if they know what you can do, they're going to come for you and this, and that. to play it now like an allegory for racism, I just feel like it's an interesting, different way to go about it. And this idea of Clark having shame and not really knowing what to do with these things that he's heard about himself and not wanting to be other, wanting to fit in so badly. I think that there's definitely some interesting character stuff to investigate there, and that could make
Sure,
for a
sure.
very interesting script. So, point number two, I'm with. I'm curious to see how they handle that, and the colorblind casting. I personally, I can handle it. I'm just worried it's going to create unnecessary conversations that are going to once again lead to a reboot that doesn't get sequels. That's just my one big
Right,
fear. I've lived through it twice already. Okay. Point number three, Superman is heavily nerfed, being taken back to his golden age roots. He can no longer fly. He can instead leap tall buildings in a single bound. He doesn't have heat vision, frost breath, and x-ray vision, and he's described as moving at Mach 7. So basically, he's insanely fast and can jump really far, and he's strong, but that seems to be it. So what
sure.
is your first reaction hearing that?
So, I mean, piggybacking off of point number two that we just talked about,
Yeah.
without all the spectacle, all those extra powers, it gives them a lot more focus to really focus on who Superman is and what he
Hmm.
represents without all the razzle dazzle. The other thing I'm thinking of too is, like you mentioned, we've had Superman Returns. Big budget, I think, for that movie. Didn't get a good return. Man of Steel, pretty big budget. Didn't get a good return. You know what just had a not huge budget compared to other Superman films that did very well? The Batman.
Yeah.
So I wonder if this is also a way of them safely navigating the Superman waters again and saying, let's do a little more low budget, more grounded,
Hmm.
take on Superman that where we can spend maybe 100 million and see if it actually, captures audiences and we can get the blue Boy Scout back, in, the public's eyes in a
Yeah.
really good light. And then
Yeah.
from there, we can like up it into something bigger. So I wonder if like part of that was maybe to Coates was like, hey, try to focus on something that's a little less razzle dazzle
Mhm.
and let's see what we can do there. But I think it's actually a cool idea. I feel like just me as the comic nerd and the superhero nerd, I do eventually want to see him fly and shoot laser beams
Yeah.
because like it's cool. It's
Yeah.
awesome. Like
Yeah.
it's just awesome. It's cool. I want to see all that stuff. But I mean, it's cool. Like as long as this isn't another origin story and is like a year. This sounds like it could be like a year or two thing, like we've been talking about. When they did the New 52, they actually kind of readdressed that again. And if you remember in Action Comics, they had him running around with the Superman T-shirt and the
T-shirt
jeans
and
and the
jeans, yeah.
boots. And I'm like, I can dig that if that's like this movie, and then
Mhm.
maybe in the second movie we start really seeing him like his powers growing, and maybe he's younger, but he's been out there for a little bit. So this could really work for me. But yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder if like they can do this movie much safer, save a little money, and not have to worry if it doesn't do well and lose
Mhm.
a shit ton of money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you go to the budget. I mean, it makes sense. I didn't even think of that. For me, when I first read this, I thought, okay, this is how they're going to address the relatability issue. Because right when people talk about Superman, one of the frequent things that comes back from people who don't like the character or whatever, just have some sort of thing where they don't think he's going to ever be number one again, that Batman is just the guy and that Superman is kind of a passe, old fashioned character. One of the things that comes back a lot is he's basically impervious. He has every ability, he's super powerful. How am I supposed to root for someone who can just solve everything because he has a power for everything, you know? And so when I read this, I'm like, this is a way to kind of make him more human and more relatable. If he doesn't have a million powers and they're not all maxed out, that he has a few key abilities, and maybe we'll see him, get stronger and develop new ones as the series goes. To me, that's where my mind went. I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be a way to let audiences see him as not just this all powerful, impervious, unstoppable demigod,
Right.
And it also made me think that Ta-Nehisi Coates must have read Superman Smashes the Klan while preparing for this, because it's the same. You're going to read it. When you read that book and you look back at this thread, you're going to go, Coates was totally digging on this vibe
Right.
because in that book, he doesn't fly. He leaps tall
Hmm.
buildings. He moves real fast. He's strong, and bullets bounce off him. But he hasn't figured everything out yet. He doesn't have the heat vision or the ice breath yet. I don't think
Right.
either. And it's something where, like, organically, as part of the story, he figures out, oh, I can do more than leap because a situation arises where he's carrying someone to safety and he basically like soars and he's doing it instinctually. He doesn't even notice it. The girl he's saving notices it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
She's like, you
that's
might
cool.
be able to do more than you realize. But whatever, you got to read the book. But the point
Yeah.
is, like, reading that, it's also just straight out of that book. So I'm very much into this idea of him not having all these abilities just yet, him developing them as he grows as a hero and finds out more about himself. So yeah, if
Yeah.
point three is accurate, I'm with it.
Yeah, I should
Now,
mention too, in the new
yeah.
52 reboot, they did sort of power him down a little bit. Like I don't
Hmm.
they he still had all of his abilities, but they kind of added the thing where like he would get a little fatigued after a while. So if he was fighting
Okay.
for a long time or using his powers, he would get a little like drained and he would need to kind of like recover a little bit, which like that to me, like I liked that change a little bit. I was like, oh, it
Yeah.
makes him a little more like he's not just like cause like he would just be able to just punch forever, like do
Yeah.
everything
Yeah. Yeah.
forever. And like I know, like some people are just like, whatever, who cares? He's Superman, and it's not about that, but it kind of is about that. They're
Yeah.
like, at least
Yeah.
interesting if he gets a little fatigued and he needs to kind of take a breather or get a little recharge from the yellow sun or something, you
Yeah.
know. So that could be cool. I'm digging this, man. I'm digging this.
I'm
It's
digging this
different. It's
too.
cool. Why not?
Yeah.
So
And
different.
honestly, looking at this, like, if this makes me think of another aspect from Superman Smashes the Clan. I should just, this episode sponsored by
just tell,
Superman
just
Smashes
tell
the
me the
Clan.
whole story. I won't need to
Available
borrow it from
on Amazon. Yeah. Um, no, something else that I like about that story's approach to his origin and all that is that in that version of the story, since he does feel some sort of like shame and doesn't want to think of himself as an alien, um, he never has that thing where he goes to the fortress and is trained and learns of his heritage and all that sort of
you.
stuff. He
Oh,
becomes Superman just because he's got these abilities. He wants to help. So his mom, legit, Martha Kent, makes him a suit so he can go help people. But he is still sort of a mystery to himself. And at some point throughout the story, he starts learning more and accepting that, what makes me different is also what makes me who I am and makes me special. And
yeah,
he starts going towards his special heritage and wanting to learn more and all that sort of stuff. So that would also, like, if they were to borrow that for this movie, I'd be like, that would be such a new way to approach it. We've already
sure.
seen two guys get lectures from Jor-El about how inspirational they're going to be and all that. So, we've done the fortress origin already. Having a
Right.
Clark who goes from Smallville straight to saving lives because he's got it in him and he feels like if I'm not helping people, then I'm part of the problem. And then along the way, discovering that other stuff, I think that's such a cool way to approach it.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, number four, they do have descriptions of the characters in the script. Oh, so this is about the gender, the race bending stuff. So essentially, it's written for an Asian Lois Lane, a black Perry White, and a traditional Jimmy Olsen. So, how does hearing that strike you there, Brederson?
It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we already had the
Like,
black Perry White, right? Like that's
yeah,
fine. Asian Lois Lane, I'm with it. Just as long as
yeah.
she feels like Lois, I don't care where she's from.
Yeah, I don't care if she's purple
Um,
like Thanos. Like,
yeah.
just be Lois Lane. I don't care. Like,
And then the other thing is Jimmy Olsen. See, I think it's funny that Jimmy goes traditional. It almost makes you feel like Coates or whoever or JJ Abrams, like they were in on the fact that everyone hated what Zack Snyder did to Jimmy Olsen.
yeah,
So they were like, we're just gonna give them the beloved traditional Jimmy because in Zack Snyder's one, he gets murdered in the first few minutes
yeah.
of
You didn't
Batman
like
versus Superman.
undercover FBI agent Jimmy
Yeah.
Olsen that got his brain splattered across the desert? No?
Yeah, like
We're
for me,
into
like
that.
that's why the the quote about the no race bending for Jimmy and that he's just a
Yeah,
freckled redhead. I'm like, that seems like a concession from the people making the movie. Like,
yeah.
all right, we're not
But
going to
then
change
didn't
it.
we have Jenny Olsen in Man of Steel as
We
well?
had,
And it was
yeah.
a female. Was it his sister?
Well,
Was it
she was
supposed to be?
Jenny, and I think people like said that she might be Olsen, but I don't know if we ever get her last name as
Yeah, I
actually
was under the
being
impression
Olsen.
that she was Jenny Olsen, and they like did a gender
Yeah.
bender.
But then I think I thought that too. But then in BVS, they actually have Jimmy Olsen, and they never acknowledge that, like, oh yeah, my sister works at the planet with you, Lois.
Well, he couldn't say
So
anything. His brains were everywhere.
uh,
He didn't have time to
it's
think.
hard to talk when your
Yeah,
brains are everywhere. Uh, number five, the film. I think that I want that on a shirt.
yeah.
It's hard
It's
to
hard
talk
to
when
talk
your
when your
brains are
brains
everywhere.
are everywhere.
Number five, the film is currently utilizing the Golden Age version of the Ultra Humanite. Can you look up the Ultra Humanite real quick?
Yeah,
Look
I
up
love
like
it.
the
I want to do it.
DC Wikia because I'm not too familiar with them. But the Ultra Humanite as the main antagonist, although this may change, at no point in the story does he use the albino gorilla body.
After a
I
quick
have
Google, Mario, let me tell you, you don't want the albino gorilla
oh no.
because it looks crazy.
Yeah,
It
I
just looks
have
like, I
to
mean,
admit.
honestly, it looks like white haired Gorilla Grodd, which is
Oh.
like we don't need that. I don't
But
need a
also
big
I've
CG
seen the
monkey.
Ultra Humanite as like a bald guy, almost like a mad scientist, like Lex Luthor.
Yeah,
I've
so
seen
and
him depicted a couple ways.
have this. So I'm sure this is the way. I would hope this is the way they go with it, especially
Yeah.
if they said they're not doing the gorilla. So he's a fiendish mad scientist. He's paralyzed from the waist down and confined to a wheelchair. His
Uh-huh.
goal is domination of the earth. He's portrayed as nearly bald in two different texts and completely bald in two others. He's a mental giant and the head of a vast ring of evil enterprises. He's super smart and he wants to take over the world. Is in a nutshell.
Okay. So it is like a Lex
Yeah.
Luthor type, but I guess depending on how they depict him and the whole wheelchair angle, if they go with that. I mean, that's interesting. It plays into that whole idea of like the brain versus brawn type of villain hero dynamic, where here's a guy who's brilliant, but physically not able to do that much. And he was able to get away with just his brilliance until this Superman guy started coming and ruining all of his plans. So I could kind of see how, like, the crippled genius going after Superman thing. I'm kind of down for that. I
Oh,
guess
and
it
just
just,
for
yeah.
fun, while we're here, I went down a little further. I skipped past all the gorilla stuff. In the New 52 reboot,
Yes.
he reappeared, and this version is a fear-feeding alien from the Phantom Zone.
Hmm.
He gets out and feeds on the fear of Superman when he is a child. Um, but young Clark is too strong for him, so he retreats to the Phantom Zone. Interesting.
Well,
Um,
this does say it's the golden age version of the Ultra Humanite, so it's got to be
so
one of
it's
the
Mad
older ones,
Scientist
not the
version,
new
yeah.
52. Yeah. I mean, either way, I'm just relieved that it's not Lex and it's not Zod. All right, we've done those two to death. I was hoping for Brainiac, but then again, maybe we save that. We build to Brainiac.
I know I
Um,
feel like we've been beating the Brainiac since the Revengers days, beating the Brainiac drum. I've been like,
yeah,
when am I gonna get my Brainiac? Like he's a very compelling villain.
he is.
But maybe you have to build up that Kryptonian heritage and
Yeah.
his connection to that first, really, because I think that's what makes Brainiac even more
And
like
see, I would love it, by the
sinister.
way. See, now I'm just going on a bit of a tangent here, just
Sure,
a
why not?
theory, a quick
That's what we
theory
do.
spiral. Yeah, like it is kind of a fanboy show, right?
Yeah.
Let's fanboy over this for a little bit.
Me being me.
Me being me, I'm gonna fanboy all over this. So, what if he really doesn't know his Kryptonian origins or anything about Jor-El or any of that stuff until like later on in the movie, or possibly in movie two. And in that is where Jor-El reveals to him that there's this artificial intelligence that he had built to help Krypton, but actually ended up destroying Krypton. And, we don't know what became of it, but that's what did it. and that sets
Right.
up that, the Brainiac ship is still lurking around, and when it finally comes to Earth, maybe it shows up in an innocuous way. It's not an obvious thing. It just comes, like I always thought it'd be interesting if Brainiac almost begins like an Alexa or a Siri, where it's like this AI that everyone allows into their house and talks to and thinks, oh gosh darn, this is so convenient. And then
Right.
all of a sudden something happens and it goes all Skynet on us. And now it's building robot armies and whatever. And we find out that that's Brainiac.
Do we
So
get the shrunken city of Kandor in
I
the
don't
little
know.
thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why people want Brainiac so bad. There's so many cool little ways to
Yeah.
go about it. And with the allegory of today, with like, man versus machine and technology and AI, and scientists around the world are trying to develop artificial intelligence that's intelligent, but not too intelligent, so it doesn't actually become self-aware and get rid of us. Like there's all kinds of
Yeah.
interesting conundrums about super intelligence and artificial intelligence. You could totally bake that into a Brainiac story, and it would be relevant. It would be thrilling. It'd be scary. It'd be, I think it'd be an awesome way to go. But
Yep.
for now, it looks like we have the Ultra Humanite, but maybe they set up Brainiac at a later date. Number 6 was the script is rather long. So, in other words, 165 pages. Which do you know the general kind of rule of thumb on that, Brett? What that
Yeah,
means
usually
for
it's
the
about a
time?
minute per page
Yeah.
is typically how that goes. But I mean, like that,
So
it's so early on, right? Like
yeah, it is
that's
so
just what the
early
script is.
on.
They're gonna chip, snip, snip, snip,
Well, but
and
are
add
they? They
and
just
strip.
released
I
a
don't know.
3-hour Batman movie. Are they going
That's
to
true.
trim that?
That's
I don't
true.
know.
But
I don't
I'm just
know.
saying that
Yeah.
script is gonna change
Yeah.
50 times before it gets
Of
made,
course.
if it
Of
gets made.
course. Um, but yeah, but right now, the fact that it's clocking in at 2 hours and 45 minutes and is seemingly being written as more of like a prestige project, an awards contender, and not just like a summer blockbuster superhero tentpole. I mean, that's interesting. I don't have a lot to say on that, but it just sounds like they're going for something that has some heft to it. And
Right.
I, for one, will never argue against bringing some heft to a Superman story.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, or shall we go to 7?
No, let's move on to 7.
All right. So the final one was just the film is a love letter to Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's original comics. I mean, that part doesn't really matter so much, but in conjunction with the line, the government hates him, but the people love him, that he's a champion of the oppressed. Because it's true. When Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster first introduced him, it's amazing. If you go back to the first comics, like he's not fighting superpowered aliens or big cartoonish
Right.
over the top 1930s, weird cartoony bad guys. He's fighting people who take advantage of people. And he's fighting a man who abuses his wife. And he's going after people. He's going after people who hurt the little man, or who
Right.
help the people who need the most, who hurt the people who need the most help. So I love that idea too. If that's where
Yeah.
they're going to go, I think that's an amazing way to approach the story. I think it goes right back to his roots. And who knows, maybe reintroducing Superman in the way that the world first got to know him will be the key to finally getting a successful film
Yeah.
relaunched again. You know what I mean? We've tried
Yeah.
all these other ways, but maybe literally going back to that 1938 sort of blueprint and updating it to fit with today, maybe that is the secret sauce that we've always needed.
Yeah. I think it might
So,
be.
yeah. So there is your Superman on film update for the week. Very interesting rumors. Again, I don't know who this Cherry Faluda is. I don't know if they just got high one night and made all these up and went on Twitter. But hey, this is what we're here to talk about. This is the Fanboy Podcast. I am Superman on film. This is what we do. So, all right, now Brett, I'm going to let you steer us. Where do you want to take the conversation next after
Oh
we just
boy.
spent 45 minutes basically on Superman?